What's up guys, in today's video we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the most interesting fights taking place this weekend at UFC 283. We're going to be taking a look at the fight between Paul Craig and Johnny Walker from a betting perspective, and this is one of the most complex fights on the card, so I'm really hoping that you're going to get a lot of value out of this video and find the information that I'm going to share with you very useful. If you like this breakdown video and you want to watch more breakdowns, check out the description below where you'll find links for YouTube videos where I break down other fights on the main card of UFC 283. If you'd like to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link for that in the description below. On there, you'll find breakdown videos for every single fight on every single UFC card, as well as my own personal pre-fight bets that I share. If live betting is more your thing, there are also spaces available at the moment to join my live betting group. You can see this profitability chart in the background, which shows my performance over the last 8 years since I've been tracking results. Live betting is how I make my living, perform very well at it, so if you'd like to give it a try, there's currently spaces available. When they sell out, they don't come up very often. Most of the year, the live betting group is sold out because I have to cap how many people are in the group, because of course the more people that try to bet the same thing at the same time in live betting, the faster the odds decline and become suspended. So I set a limit on the number of people in the group. Most of the time is sold out, but at the start of every year, you know what it's like. Christmas is an expensive time, you know. January's quite quiet for the UFC. We've had a few weeks without any events now, so spaces tend to open up early in the year. If it's something you'd like to jump on board with and give a try for 2023, space is available now. To sign up, just go to MMABettingTips.com and you can find the live betting tips link there. So now let's jump into this very, very complex fight between Paul Craig and Johnny Walker. And the place where we need to start off before we even get into discussing how these two match up from a stylistic point of view is by taking a look at the odds, because you guys know me, I always say you've got to let the odds do the work for you, and this fight is a classic example of where when you look at the odds it becomes pretty obvious which one of these guys gives you the better risk to reward ratio. Because if we take a look at the odds on Johnny Walker, he's currently around about a 1.53 favourite, which is going to be minus 189 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Paul Craig, he's around an average of 2.60, which is going to be plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. So what these odds imply is that Johnny Walker should have pretty major advantages in this fight and should win the fight a decent percentage of the time, 65% to be exact. But for me, this is a classic example of where the odds are definitely off, because in many ways this fight is very similar to the main event between Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira, where both of these guys have extreme advantages in the area that the other is weak. And whenever you've got that kind of matchup where one guy has got a certain set of skills that we absolutely know can cause the other guy a problem, neither of them should be a big favourite, because we know if either one of these guys can keep the fight in the area that they have that extreme advantage, their chances of winning goes up exponentially. And so if I were capping this fight between Johnny Walker and Paul Craig, I'd have the odds at roughly in the even money odds range, because we know if the fight stays standing, Johnny Walker is going to have a huge advantage. And if the fight goes to the ground, Paul Craig is going to have a huge advantage. So I don't really understand why Walker is the big favourite here, because he's going to be in a lot of trouble if this fight goes to the ground. Let me know what you think in the comments below, though. Do you think the odds are accurate on this? Do you think Walker should be a big favourite? Am I missing something? Let me know below whether you agree with me or not. If we take a look at the tail of the tape before we really get into the nitty gritty of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, we can see that Walker is blessed with a few X factors which, definitely give him a better chance of winning. The first and most obvious is the fact that he's Brazilian. And on top of that, we know that Walker is someone that very much feeds off the energy of the crowd. We know he's got the big exciting walkouts where he dances on his way to the octagon. in the actual octagon itself, he likes to do a little dance, do some somersaults. Walker's one of these guys that is at his best when he's fighting in amongst, when he's fighting in a big arena full of loads of fans going crazy. He really feeds off that energy, and he performs well in that pressure cooker. He performs well in that chaos of a big arena with a great atmosphere. We know Walker is a showman, and he's going to love it in there on Saturday night with all the 20,000 crazy Brazilian fans right behind him, giving him a ton of support. We know home advantage is huge when UFC do events in Brazil, with Brazilian fighters winning around 65% of the time when they face non-Brazilians on events taking place in Brazil. So statistically, Walker's got an advantage this weekend facing a non-Brazilian in Brazil. It's not just anecdotal when we say home advantage is a big deal. We've got the statistics to back it up. On top of that, Walker's got a decent size and reach advantage over Paul Craig. We can see that Walker is 6'6" with an 82-inch reach, while Craig is 6'3" with a 76-inch reach. So that gives Walker a 6-inch reach advantage in this fight, which is pretty significant, and again, does give him a statistical edge in this matchup, especially because he already has quite a big advantage when it comes to striking over Craig. There's a bit of an age difference, 5 years, but that shouldn't mean too much here. And so let's explore how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. So far, so good for Walker. Home advantage, reach advantage. It doesn't hurt to have either of those things on your side. And when it comes to striking, we also know Walker is going to have a big edge over Craig. He is mean, nasty, fast, explosive, and has legit one-shot KO power in every single limb on his body. Paul Craig, for the most part, is just a BJJ guy. He is uncomfortable on the feet, he is bad defensively, and he's not that dangerous offensively either. Paul Craig is tricky to hurt though, because just like guys who also have a base in BJJ, like Fabrizio Verdum or Damian Maia or Ryan Hall, it's actually very difficult to knock Paul Craig out or hurt him on the feet, because anytime he senses danger on the feet, he immediately flops to his back or tries to pull guard, and it's very, very difficult to knock someone out that won't stand in front of you. A really good example of this was his last fight against Volkan Oezdemir, where Oezdemir clearly had an advantage on the feet. Craig couldn't take Oezdemir down and hold him down, and as a result he was struggling to defend himself standing, and Oezdemir was causing him big problems, inflicting a lot of damage on the feet. Because Paul Craig couldn't compete when it came to striking, he just proceeded to just flop to his back anytime he found himself in trouble in striking range, which resulted in the fight going to a unanimous going the distance to a decision. I mean, the referee even told Paul Craig off in that fight because he kept flopping to his back. But I mean, what can you really do to stop it apart from deducting points? The referee can't do a lot. If Paul Craig doesn't want to stand there getting punched in the face, if he wants to pull guard, flop to his back, it is what it is. That's his style. We've seen Ryan Hall build a career off it. But if you do look at Paul Craig's record, you can see that he's only been knocked out one time at the hands of Alonzo Menefield. The other three losses, Khalil Roundtree, the other two losses came on the ground via Kimura and ground and pound. So, getting knocked out twice in 22 pro fights when you're as bad as Craig is on the feet is pretty impressive, especially because Paul Craig has fought a lot of dangerous strikers. But he hasn't fought many guys as dangerous as Johnny Walker, and one of the things that makes Walker so dangerous is that for a big guy, he can cover distance very, very quickly, and he's very unpredictable. When he comes forward to attack you, you don't know if he's loading up on a big power right hand, a flying knee, a spinning back kick, a spinning elbow. And when you are facing someone like Walker that has the element of surprise on his hands, because there's so much that he can do to hurt you and he's so unorthodox, it does increase the probability that he's going to catch you with something to knock you out. Because when he does come forward and blitz you, you really don't have any idea what he's going to throw at you, and the shots that knock you out are the ones you don't see coming. And Walker's very good at landing shots you don't see coming because of how explosive he is, how unorthodox he is, and how quickly he can cover distance. So if the fight stays standing, I think you're going to see Paul Craig in a defensive shell. I think as soon as he feels Walker's power, he's not going to want anything to do with Walker on the feet. He's going to go into a defensive shell and just look to avoid, taking damage. He's not going to want to exchange. And I think you're going to see Walker do a pretty good job of using his length to just hammer and chip away at Paul Craig and rack up decent volume. Now, Walker isn't as reckless as he used to be. We saw this for the first time when he main evented his fight against Thiago Santos, where he started a lot slower and took a much more strategic approach to the fight, because of course, in matchups before that, he had a tendency to come out the gate super aggressive, trying to kill everyone in round one, and if he didn't get the job done in round one, like we saw in his matchup against Corey Anderson and Nikita Krylov, he tended to adrenaline dump. So you could see, Walker's not as crazy and aggressive as he used to be. I'm not saying he won't be this weekend. Perhaps he will be. He's a crazy guy. But for the most part, Walker paces himself a lot better now and doesn't come out with that kill or be killed style we saw from him in his early UFC fights. But if anything, that makes him more dangerous, because the key to beating Walker when he first came to the UFC was to just weather the early storm. Similar to the way in which you beat Terence McKinney. If you just survive that first 2 or 3 minutes, you know that he's going to adrenaline dump, he's going to gas out, and then you can drag him into the second round where he's a bit of a pussycat. He's going to be slow, bad defensively, hand speed's going to drop, he's not going to have anywhere near as much power and pop on his shots, and he becomes very beatable. But that's not the case anymore. Now that he's pacing himself, he carries fight-ending power deeper into the fight, and he moves a lot better deep into the fight. So he's still just as fast and explosive in rounds 2 and 3 as he is in the first, because he's pacing himself, and instead of going crazy trying to kill you in round one, committing tons of energy to the finish in the first couple of minutes, he's spreading all that explosive energy out across 15 minutes now, instead of compacting it all into the first 2-3 minutes. But he is still a big boy at 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. He's a very big human being, and he's got big old muscles, and guys like Johnny Walker can't work too hard for too long without gassing out. You don't see guys with Johnny Walker's body type that have got amazing cardio. It's just, it defies the laws of nature, right? He's a big human being. And while Walker has got a lot better at pacing himself, and as a result his gas tank holds up a lot better than he used to, there are things you can do to Walker to get him very tired. If you make Johnny Walker grapple, he tends to gas out very, very quickly, which is interesting because that's obviously Craig's primary skill set. It's what he does best, and it's going to be what he's looking to do in this fight. If the fight were to stay standing, I'm pretty confident that Walker is going to be able to pace himself over 3 rounds and be very comfortable the whole time and outstrike Craig pretty comfortably. I don't think there's anything Craig can do to make Walker work hard on the feet, because I don't think Craig's going to get near enough to Walker to make Walker work hard on the feet without Craig taking big damage and potentially get knocked out. But Craig's offensive wrestling has improved a lot in the last couple of years, and we know he's very tricky on the ground. He's submitted a lot of good guys, he's put a lot of good guys in bad positions on the ground, and to be fair to Craig, he's submitted a lot of grapplers that are far better than Johnny Walker on the ground. And so Walker's an interesting case because he's not easy to take down early in a fight, because he's athletic, he's explosive, he's powerful, he's huge, he's strong, he's got good balance. So early in the fight, in round 1, where Walker's still got all that explosive athletic energy, it's very unlikely that Paul Craig is going to be able to take Johnny Walker down. But what I've noticed about Johnny Walker is the more you make him grapple, the more you make him defend takedowns, the more you make him battle for position in the clinch, the worse his takedown defense becomes. And so if Paul Craig has done his homework on Johnny Walker this weekend, and he comes into this fight with the intention to make Walker work very hard early in the fight, I think there's a really good chance that Craig takes over big time in the second and third round and uses a grappling heavy game plan to cause Walker big problems. Now, the problem with that is in order for Paul Craig to make a conscious decision to make Walker work really hard early and drag him into deep waters, is you've got to be good at game planning and strategy, and you've got to have good fight IQ, which are unfortunately 3 qualities that Paul Craig lacks. Paul Craig, for me, has really bad fight IQ and a lack of game planning and strategy. For me, Paul Craig is much more of an opportunistic grappler, where he's very good at jumping on, the tiniest little opening and punishing you and submitting you. But he's not particularly good at building a game plan and strategy around MMA grappling that gives him a good chance of winning. For me, he's one of these guys that just looks to drag you to the ground by any means necessary, and if he starts to struggle in his quest to do that, will just go into a defensive shell and just look to survive. I don't feel that's going to be good enough here against Johnny Walker. And my fear for Craig is if Craig does commit hard to the takedown in round 1 and doesn't get it, and to be fair, I don't think he will get it because Walker's not easy to take down. My fear for Craig is that he's not smart enough to know that if he just persists with trying to get the fight to the ground, his probability of doing so goes up exponentially, because the more you force Walker to work and defend these takedowns, the easier to take down he becomes. So even though Craig may not have much success with his grappling early in this fight, so long as he's forcing Walker to do a little bit of grappling, even if it's just battling for position in the clinch or defending takedowns, he's still putting money in the bank. But like I say, in order to know that, you've really got to have done your homework on your opponent and come in with an airtight game plan and strategy. And historically and typically, Craig ain't that dude, which is crazy, right? Because at the highest level of the sport, you'd think tactics and strategy and game planning would be the main priority for fighters, since these are the things that so often dictate the outcome of an MMA contest. But you'd be surprised that the vast majority of the time, fighters do not show up with a good game plan and strategy, and that quite often costs them. And Paul Craig is the exact kind of guy that will fall victim to that. So this is an interesting matchup because, like I say, both guys have got extreme advantages in the area that the other is weak. If it stays standing, Craig's in a lot of trouble. If the fight goes to the ground, Walker's in a lot of trouble. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, we know that Walker's the favourite with odds at an implied probability of 65%. And Craig's odds are around an implied probability of 40%. They're in that range. And so when you look at this fight, for me, even though I do think the odds should be closer to even money, because in order for either one of these guys to be a big favourite, which Walker is, he shouldn't have any major weaknesses that Craig could potentially exploit. So I do disagree that Walker is this big of a favourite, because his cardio is questionable, his ground game is very low level, and for anyone questioning that, please just take 15 minutes out of your day to go watch Johnny Walker versus Nikita Krylov, then come back at me. Walker looked like a fucking very, very low-level grappler in that fight. But anyway, I just wanted to include that, because I always get people in the comments be like, oh, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, just go watch this fight. You haven't done your homework. So if you look at this fight, right, and the odds, I do agree Walker should be the favourite, just not this big of a favourite. And so the reason why I do feel he should still be the favourite is because he's got home advantage, he's got a size advantage, even though he does have big weaknesses on the ground that Craig could potentially exploit. The fight starts standing, and on top of that, he's difficult to take down early. And I don't know, I don't trust Craig to have that persistence to go through the fire in round 1 and continue to try and spam those takedowns and drag Walker to the ground in rounds 2 and 3. I don't know if Craig is smart enough to do that. And so I agree that Walker should be the favourite, but I do think the odds are off here. And as a result, if you really want to bet this fight, I would go dog or pass Craig. I think Craig gives you a far better risk to reward ratio than Johnny Walker, because for me, both of them haven't got the best fight IQ. And if I were betting Walker this weekend as a big favourite, I would feel very uncomfortable with the threat that Craig poses to him on the ground, with how bad he's looked on the ground in the past and how fast he gasses and gets tired. If you do force him to grapple, like say Craig does find a way to get Walker down in round 1, gets on top of him, takes his back, wears him down for a couple minutes, 2-3 minutes in round 1, Walker's going to be so tired in rounds 2 and 3 that he'll be far easier for Walker to then continue, for Craig to then continue to get the fight to the ground. So I do think this is dog or pass, but risky to bet on either one of these guys this weekend, because, like I say, they've both got big weaknesses in the area that the other is strong. But by that very by me saying that, you're better off taking the underdog, right, for the better payoff than the big favourite who's got major weaknesses. So we think about this fight in terms of over-unders. I actually quite like the over in this fight, which I know sounds crazy because, again, both guys are very dangerous. Both guys tend to not go to a decision very often. If you look at Craig's record, there's a bunch of finishes on his record, doesn't go to a decision very often. If you look at Walker's record, again, very rarely goes to a decision. But the reason why I do like this fight to go, over 1.5 rounds, I quite like this at dog odds. The reason being, the odds are so steep on this fight to end inside the distance that I just think is worth a gamble betting on the fact that Craig may not be able to get Walker to the ground. And if the fight stays standing because Craig can't get the fight to the ground, we may see a very similar kind of situation to the Paul Craig Oezdemir fight, where Walker is trying to knock Craig out, but he can't, because every time he gets close enough to inflict a knockout shot on Craig, Craig kind of flops to his back or pulls guard. Like I say, it's very difficult to knock someone out that doesn't stand right in front of you and exchange. Craig isn't going to want anything to do with Walker on the feet, which will make it difficult for Walker to knock him out. And so, is it more likely this fight goes the distance? No. I would expect one of these guys to get a finish, a pretty high percentage of the time. But if you look at the odds, the implied probability on average odds of 1.17 on this fight to end inside the distance is 85%. Very difficult to find value there. Whereas the odds on this fight to go to a decision, say average odds of like 4.75 plus 375, the implied probability there is just 21%. I think there's a better than 21% chance this fight goes the distance, especially if you go and watch the Oezdemir versus Paul Craig matchup. And on top of that, Johnny Walker's more cautious approach to fighting these days, like we saw against Thiago Santos, where he's much more inclined to try and pace himself these days instead of coming out the gate super aggressive, trying to kill everyone in round 1. So that's a nice little long shot bet there. Over 1.5 rounds, pretty good. Because even if Walker does gas in the fight and you bet the over 1.5 rounds, he's probably not going to become too tired to defend himself until, maybe the second half of round 2. So even if Craig were to wear him down and then get a submission on the ground when Walker's too tired to defend himself in the second half of the fight, your over 1.5 rounds at dog odds would still cash. So again, I know the fight to go to a decision, it's not super likely, but if you let the odds do the work for you, I think it's a cheeky little outside bet that you might want to consider this weekend. So in terms of prop bets, we can see that the most likely outcome, obviously Walker by KO. The bookies are loving that. Big favourite odds on that. No value there. Craig by submission is the other one that interests me. Actually, that's quite a good prop. I do like that. Again, Walker by decision odds at 8.50. Think that's pretty good. Again, is it the most likely outcome? Absolutely not. But is there value? I think there is. Just because there's a few different ways that this could hit. Walker by decision could hit if Craig's unable to get him to the ground, goes into a defensive shell, and as a result that becomes difficult for Walker to knock him out, because every time Walker gets close enough to him, he just flops to his back, pulls guard like he did against Oezdemir. That's one way this bet could hit. Another way that it could hit is if Walker respects the threat of Craig's takedown, doesn't want to adrenaline dump, doesn't want to gas, so we get a much slower paced, cautious approach from Walker, where he starts much slower and just looks to chip away, on the feet at Craig, similar to what he did in the Thiago Santos fight, rather than going balls to the wall, committing hard to a finish and potentially gassing himself out. We could get that type of performance from Walker as well, which would, dramatically increase the chances this one goes with decision. So the way I would look at these props and the over-under is, obviously, Craig's very dangerous on the ground. Walker is very dangerous on the feet. So it is absolutely more likely that one of these guys gets a finish and the fight ends inside the distance. However, the odds reflect that. And the odds are very, very, in my opinion, overweighted on the fight not going to a decision. And I think there's a reasonably good chance of this fight going to a decision, which the bookies haven't really factored into their odds. And that's where you can find a discrepancy on the odds, a little bit of additional value, and take a gamble. Are they super strong positions that are really, really likely to hit a very high percentage of the time? They're not. But if you let the odds do the work for you, I do think there's some value there. I do think there's a reasonably good risk to reward ratio there for you. So I hope you found this breakdown video useful. It is a very complex fight. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Are you betting this fight? If so, let me know who you are betting. Can't wait. There's bound to be some comments of people telling me that Walker's better than Craig on the ground and that Craig won't be able to do anything to him on the ground, yada, yada, yada. But please, if you do feel that way, before dropping a comment, please go watch Johnny Walker versus Nikita Krylov. I think you will be very surprised by how bad Walker is on the ground. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you like this breakdown video, hit the like button below and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back tomorrow with another breakdown on YouTube for UFC 283. If you don't want to wait till then, you can find breakdown videos for every single fight on UFC 283 over on my website, mabettingtips.com, as well as all the bets that I will be placing on this weekend's event. And remember, if you want to join my live betting group, mabettingtips.com, live betting tips, join now. The spaces won't last forever. When they're gone, they're gone. And trust me, I think you'll like it a lot. So anyway, take care. Have a great night. I'll see you very soon. Bye.